Hi everyone, Tracy DW here. Elizabeth II did not begin her reign or become queen at Buckingham Palace. Her royal duties as heir apparent and the untimely death of her father, George VI, created a set of circumstances where she was unable to be present at her father's bedside when he drew his last breath. An experience that many of us can identify with. For Queen Elizabeth, she was able to transform this lost opportunity into a newfound inspiration that has carried her through every duty and regal obligation for the last 7 decades. On the 5th of February 1952, the 25-year-old princess was on a royal tour. It was during her stay at the Treetops Hotel at the Aberdare National Park in Kenya that her husband, the late Duke of Edinburgh, told her of her father's death. It was also in Kenya that the young princess underwent a rite of passage, passing from the position of heir apparent to that of monarch. However, it was not the only new monarchy that had emerged in Kenya. The reign of nationalism was sending shockwaves right across the African continent, where people of many tribes began to form a collective identity and unity against a common threat, a violation of their golden stool in their brutal mistreatment and the unjust occupation of their land by a foreign power. Kenya's significance also grew as the rise of nationalism began to build momentum. This sentiment became the driving force that would cause the colonies to question and challenge whether the young queen could continue long to reign over us. Events across Kenya during the next 8 years became a catalyst for how Britain would shape its imperial policy over the next 3 decades, not just towards Africa, but throughout its empire. Elizabeth did briefly become Queen of Kenya during its first year of independence in 1963, when the country adopted the status as a sovereign state with a constitutional monarchy. A year later, Kenya adopted a new constitution, abolishing the monarchy and placing a president as head of state. The transition from colony to republic would show for Kenya, as well as all other British colonies across Africa and the Caribbean, that Elizabeth's reign would not be a long one. In 1952, the discontent of the Kenyan natives came to a climax through a conflict between the British Kenya colony, in the form of the British Army, Kenya Regiment and pro-British natives, against the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, later known as the Kenyan African Union, which consisted of several tribes, with the Kikuyu people as the main protagonists. The conflict is more commonly referred to as the Mau Mau Uprising, Rebellion, Revolt, or Kenyan Emergency, 1952-60. The British colonial occupation of Kenya began in 1895, 10 years after the Berlin Conference. The Kenyan emergency was preceded by decades of fierce resistance against colonisation by the Kikuyu and other African tribes. The Nandi Resistance, 1895 to 1905, the Giriama Uprising, 1913 to 14, the Miranga of 1947, Women's Revolt against enforced labour, and the Koloa Affray in 1950, all in their attempt to regain their golden stool, their land rights to some of the most fertile soil in the world, which, a combination of high altitude and ideal climate conditions, made areas which became known as the White Highlands profitable and prolific in growing coffee and tea. These uprisings punctuated a process of opposition to the British government's land expropriation. Settlement societies were established in 1902 under British plans to use Kenyan land and labour to raise capital for the Uganda Rail Project, a rail line that would run across Kenya to link Mombasa to Victoria Falls. And so native Kenyans were encouraged to become wage labourers. However, this land expropriation caused many issues for the Kikuyu, Maasai and Nandi people, as their pre-colonial migration patterns as herders, farmers, fishers and hunter-gatherers, which they had been for centuries, had now been disrupted and lost. Living in reserves caused isolation within the tribes and overcrowding, as well as discouraging economic autonomy, as natives were forbidden to grow their own crops, which undermined African farming. The Masters and Servants Ordinance passed in 1906, the introduction of identity passes, and Kenyan ex-servicemen returning from World War II who were never paid or given recognition, all worked together to create a perfect storm. Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Do you feel like you're stuck in a dinner rut? With HelloFresh, you get fresh pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Skip all those trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun and affordable. You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less. With over 25 recipes to choose from each week, there is something for everyone to enjoy. All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity. There's a selection for families, as well as quick and easy meals to suit a busy lifestyle. Or why not try our premium selection for those special occasions? Even if you're counting the calories, there's a selection of meat and vegetarian options to suit every taste, along with a great selection of desserts, sides and wines. Just go to the link in our show notes to get 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. That's the link in our show notes for 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. It's HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit. From 1920, the history of Kenya was written through British government documents, and the Kenyan emergency quickly became referred to as the Mau Mau. But what was the meaning of the term Mau Mau? Who used it first and where it came from is itself a war between fact and perspective. Was the term Mau Mau an attempt by the British to deny the Kenyan Army Union international legitimacy, or did the rebels themselves adopt the term to counter colonial propaganda? There is the suggestion that such a term may have originated from a Swahili backronym of "Let the foreigner go back abroad, let the African gain independence." There is also no agreement of etymological origins of the term Mau Mau, but another theory is that it may have originated from a Kikuyu prisoner under interrogation who uttered the words, "Those things I was told not to reveal," a reference to the oath that all who join the Kenyan African Union must take, an oath never to be forsaken or broken. The term Mau Mau was also used as a derogatory in the form of propaganda to shape British international perceptions about the Kikuyu people, to fuel divisions not only within the Kikuyu but also between the Kikuyu and other Kenyan ethnicities. Was the objective to create the perception of native Kenyans as incapable of self-rule and needing the intervention of the British? Even though divisions saw rebel and loyalist factions, as the Kenyan Army Union, they were a well-educated, highly skilled unit of individuals who planned, their attacks on British targets with strategy and precision. Did the term refer to a people fighting to reclaim their land, freedom and independence, or to a savage, violent tribal cult? Whatever its origin, the Mau Mau was an embodiment of a radical response which characterised nationalism as a movement responding to colonial domination, and was a reference to the divisions among the Kikuyu, as there was just as many on either pro and anti-British sides as some had embraced British values. The research and work of Kenyan historians such as Elkins, Guthuru, and writers such as Hudson Costa have provided a process of revisionism to present a more balanced perspective. Perspectives which provide insight into the African experience, not as passive recipients of colonialism from Britain and Europe, but seen through nationalism, a process of unifying tribes moving towards a post-colonial position through using negotiation, force, or both. Kenya's experience is again a study of how colonial occupation affects indigenous communities living on their own land, and these experiences form a contrast to those from their communities who were sold into enslavement to work in foreign lands during the 15th to 17th centuries. The experience of uprisings and rebellions against the backdrop of divided communities in Kenya is a parallel to similar events in other colonies across the African continent, such as Zimbabwe and South Africa. In 1953, the British detention camps set up in Kenya and villagisation camps set up in rural parts are similar to those which were referred to as concentration camps that were set up during the Boer War of 1899 to 1902 by Britain's Lord Roberts to implement his scorched earth policy to defeat the Boers. Also, there were parallels in the way that women and civilians, both Africans and Afrikaans, played a role in supplying food, ammunition, medicine and intelligence. Kenyan women also played a key role in active combat, and the role of Field Marshal Mutoni wa Kirima, born 1931, is one such high-ranking female and is well worth following a learning journey about. These concentration camps were used in a similar fashion to the pipeline system that the British implemented through the detention centres in Kenya, the most notorious being the Hola camp, a regime which carried out sophisticated systems of interrogation, torture and abuse, modelled on the Nazis' methods during World War II. This was another approach used to create dissension and division among the Kikuyu and weed out and eliminate resistance toward British occupation. As the 1950s went on, the growing wave of nationalism across all European and British colonies became increasingly prominent. By 1957, British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan realised that the tide was turning on Britain's credibility and its reputation was becoming weak due to the Suez Canal debacle in the previous year and America's desire to establish free trade across the colonies. More importantly, the tenacity of the Kenyan Army Union had achieved a change of attitude internationally and back in Britain towards the African colonies in the breaking down of stereotypes and dismissal of propaganda circulated to undermine perceptions about Africans and helped to develop greater empathy of their plight. Through my learning journey about Kenya, I have come to realise that Macmillan's Wind of Change speech that he made 3 years later in 1960 was motivated not only by the threat of communism from the Soviet Union and China, but also it was just as much about the exposure of the British government's knowledge and compliance with the atrocities carried out by British officials in those detention camps. Although it is unclear to what extent the Kenyan Army Union contributed towards achieving independence for the people of Kenya, the first Lancaster House Conference in January 1960 set the stage for progress towards this independence, which happened in December 1963. Even after independence, divisions within the Kikuyu people persisted. How would this be addressed by their newly elected president and former Kenyan Army Union activist leader, Jomo Kenyatta? And by 1963, nationalism established a strong foothold in all of Britain's colonies across Africa. And by 1964, as Kenya transitioned from a sovereign state to a republic within the Commonwealth, the Second Chemurenga caused Zimbabwe to embark on its journey with nationalism, a journey that enabled them to experience their own Lancaster House event in 1979. But it too, like Kenya, learned that it was easier to achieve independence through nationalism than it was to achieve lasting unity. If you liked this podcast, then you can listen to my other podcast episodes related to this one, such as Zanu and Zapu, Contrasts and Similarities, Wind of Change Expanded, and Barbados, A New Republic. And finally, don't forget what I call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement, my stories or poetic narratives, Caribbean Wind, Caribbean Rush, Nights at the Round Table, the Berlin Conference 1884, and Gone with the Wind, Macmillan's Speech for Change, and they're all available on the website in both ebook, Kindle and paperback formats. And also, I look forward to the publication of 4 new titles this summer. If you want to find out more, just visit storiestobetold.com and check out the learning platforms for The Journey's End, Giving Back Hong Kong, Bite from the Big Apple, A Story for New York, Hope for Zimbabwe, Arise the Phoenix, and A Story for South Africa. Don't forget to enter the draw if you'd like to win a free copy of Aspiring Authors magazine for Black History 2022. If you want to be in with a chance of being my winner for the month of June, just visit the website and register for your free samples of my current 4 titles to enter the draw. I'll be choosing a winner every month up to and including October. Feel free to like, follow and share me on social media when you visit the website. Just click on whichever social media link you'd like to follow me on. And as always, it's a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast series, and I encourage you to either begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. I'm Tracy DW, and this is a Stories to be Told podcast. Stay safe, stay well, stay blessed. Thanks so much for listening again, and I'll see you on the next page.